Welcome to the Me Plus Ultra Network. I'm your host, Scott Joseph, and I'm thrilled to bring you a very special episode today for both professional and personal reasons. If you've ever wondered what you could do or what advantages you might have if you walk both sides of the aisle in any specific industry, this conversation is definitely for you. We're going to dive into the unique benefits that leaders gain when they combine hands-on experience as business operators with expertise as advisors in whatever industry they might be in. Today's guests are powerhouses in the world of dealership mergers, acquisitions, and ownership. Together, they've driven billions in value and transformed businesses across the country. Joining me, Brady Schmidt is the president and the CEO of National Business Brokers. We've got Gary Mull, the co-CEO of National Business Brokers, and Drew Bray, Senior VP of National Business Brokers Mid-South Region. You're going to hear how their unique journeys, owning stores and advising others, have given them unmatched insight into business strategy, growth, and value creation. So I want you to stick around because this episode is going to unlock tips on creating value for your business, navigating business turnarounds, and why walking both sides of the aisle is the ultimate game changer for leaders. So let's dive right in. Brady, Gary, Drew, welcome to the Me Plus Ultra Network.
Good to be with you, Scott. Thanks for having us.
Privilege.
Oh, guys. So just so we have good transparency on all this here. I said personal and professional. So I owe you guys a big thank you. I've had 3 dealerships. I now have 2. And what I love about what you guys did was so easy to get done. And I was amazed at how fast you got it done. So kudos to you guys. I've known you now for a couple years and finally decided to do something. And probably one of the smartest decisions we've done. So good deal for the buyers, good deal for us, the sellers. More importantly, I assume the buyer says it was just as easy for them as it was me. So thank you.
Yeah, I think they're happy, very happy.
Good. I'll start with you, Brady. What inspired your journey? And I'm looking for like some of the key milestones, right? That led you into dealership mergers, acquisitions. And then more importantly, because it really goes to the heart of this conversation, how did you then transition into owning stores?
Yeah. Well, that's a great story that is fun to tell. And it's funny because Drew and Gary have been on that journey with me, at least in the ownership part and many years prior in the NBB part. But National Business Brokers, as you know, Scott, is a family business. My dad started it in 1978. Like most people that find themselves in careers, I got in by accident. I was going a different direction out of college. Got a phone call from my father that he needed some help, that his partner had been embezzling from him for a number of years that he didn't know about, and asked if I'd come work for him out of college to help work out of the mess. His attorney and his accountant told him he should file bankruptcy. He said, "We're not going to do that. We're going to pay everybody back." And it took 10 years, but we paid every single vendor back and every bank back and every creditor that we owed money to. And it was a trial by fire for me, learning the business from kind of the inside out. I was 21 years old, and all of my contemporaries in the company were retired business owners that decided to become brokers and sell businesses. And so it was a really great experience. And I learned a lot about integrity. I learned a lot about coming alongside people and not assuming anything until you've walked a mile in somebody else's shoes. And that was a real formative lesson for me that I think led Gary and Drew and I, all 3 of us, to dealership ownership eventually. But it was a real privilege. And then along the way, realized that selling dealerships was a lot of fun, and new car dealers were incredible people that were typically the fabric of their communities. I mean, these are the people who are showing up at the Rotary Club, who are sponsoring the local baseball teams, really engaged, really involved. Some of the most giving people I have ever met in my life as a category are new car dealers. And I spent the last 35 years brokering new car dealerships, and Drew and Gary more than a decade. Gary, 15 years now, I think. And Drew about a decade, and it's been a real fun journey. And along the way, we took a listing on a Mercedes store in Fresno, California that we had overpriced, missed the market a little bit. We couldn't sell it, but it was a fantastic business. And so Gary and Drew and I approached the owners and said, listen, we priced it. We can't sell it. Would you let us buy it if we can go raise the money? And they said yes. And so we, one of the dreams of the general manager, who was also a part owner, was to become a dealer principal. And he became our partner, became the dealer principal, and we raised the capital and had a small piece of that business and learned a ton. And along the way, I became the dealer successor of that store and had no idea how that would change my life. And then about a year and a half later, we took a listing on a Dodge, Chrysler, Jeep, Ram store and a Hyundai store in Hawaii. And Gary and I were over there meeting with Trey Vadova, who was the owner. Had no kids involved in the business, wasn't married, took the listing, started going through the process, and about 6 months into the engagement, he was diagnosed with stage 4 terminal throat cancer. And like always happens, our clients become our friends, as you know, you've experienced with us, Scott, and obviously you're a dear friend now, and we really appreciate the process we got to go through with you, which was a lot of fun. But in that process, he, realized we weren't going to have time to sell the stores, and he called Gary and I a couple of weeks before he passed away, and he said, I'd love to see my general manager become a dealer. Would you and Gary and Drew be willing to partner with him? And we said yes. So we put the money up, and Jerry Romano, who is the dealer for the people in the state of Hawaii, is our partner, operating partner over there. And it's been a really fun journey. We enjoy being car dealers. I'm the dealer principal of the 2 Hyundai stores. We also picked up the Honolulu Hyundai store. We did a good job with the first Hyundai store, and Hyundai approached us and asked us if we would take the Honolulu store, which we did. And so now we have 2 Hyundai stores there and a Dodge, Chrysler, Jeep, Ram store. And then separately, Gary and I, in partnership, bought a Ford store here in Southern California about 2 years ago now. So we have 4 stores, and we still spend most of our time, almost all of our time, brokering stores. So we have really good teams that run those dealerships. But it's been a real journey to learn, what dealers go through every day. And it really has changed the way we broker stores radically in the last 4 or 5 years. So, yeah.
It's funny. So I don't want to say the stores have become passive income for you, but if you're not in the day to day, it's somewhat like that. And I have a similar situation when it comes to that. So I like to tell my managing partner, the auto business is the easiest business I've ever been a part of.
because he's doing all the work.
That's right. That's right.
Oh, it is true.
So yeah, what's funny is we became a distributor together, selling 2 dealers in another company. Well, similar to what you're doing with Petra, right? And he then tells me, man, being a vendor, that's the easiest business I've ever been a part of.
Because he has an operating partner.
That is both sides.
There might be a good business model here somewhere in this conversation.
That's right. Well, I think that's the best tip. Find someone else to run your business and make sure they do it well, and then life is a lot easier.
Well,
all right, Drew,
and find someone smarter than you.
Oh yeah,
that's the key.
Definitely. Well, that was easy for me, Drew. You've got a really impressive background when it comes to like business development. So, how'd you find yourself getting into auto? Give me some of those key milestones. And then more specifically with national business brokers.
Sure, yeah. Out of college, I had a stint as a wholesaler in the investment side for MetLife. I was doing kind of variable annuities and mutual funds and that type of deal. So I had some securities licenses and was in that world for about 5-6 years. I guess I've got more of a nimble personality that can ultimately be very comfortable in a Fortune 50 company, with some of the structures. Very grateful for that opportunity, made some great relationships and still have them today. But decided to get into some more entrepreneurial waters after that. And I've always been friends with Gary and Brady, close personal family friends. And we've dipped our toe in some business ventures together in the past. And so I always knew about national business brokers. And, obviously through I guess we call it a crash, 08, 09. When that happened, that event happened, it definitely pulled the rug from NBB, in multiple ways. And they were still kind of restructuring after that. And in that phase of their regrowth, there was an opportunity to kind of hedge in some director of operations roles and kind of pull the team together, do some marketing and some of that structure. So I jumped into that role and developed business that way, all with the goal in mind to jump in and join them as the deal maker in the territory somewhere. So fortunately, we had some seasoned guys that were out there in different regions. One in particular in the Mid-South is now a dear friend of mine and had been working in the business, was a previous car dealer for many years himself. So it just brought a lot of horsepower to our team. And he was sort of on his slow off ramp, still is. And, you know who Chris is anyway. And so he's been a gem to be partnered with in that region. And I kind of cut my teeth with him as a partner and learned the ranks as a deal maker. And I've been in that, I guess, lane now for probably 4 or 5 years.
Nice.
Yeah.
And then, Brady, you don't know this, but at the last Business Bourbon and Cigar event, this man left our now it was for work. It was for work. So the store we sold, I've got a partner that also lives here in Louisville. He left our event to go meet with her to finish some things up. And it played an hour and a half of pickleball. Did you know this?
He's a force, man. Drew is a force on the pickleball court. Hopefully he let your partner win. That is one of our things. Our company policies is always let the client win.
Well, she and her husband are mean competitors, and she's got a couple of great pickleball courts in her backyard. And I can tell you this: I only did it in the name of business development. Otherwise, I hated to be there. It was a real bear, but I did my best to enjoy it.
Yeah. All right, Gary, you got decades of experience when it comes to commercial real estate. What led you to the buy-sell world of dealerships? And I have to talk to us. That past experience has got to play a big role in with what you're doing now.
Yeah, it's really huge, Scott. So I started with Brady during the Great Recession, during the big downfall. And what brought it about was I had spent years in the commercial real estate side, developing shopping centers primarily. And man, the calculus just changed completely in the development world during that recession period. We went from being able to get a lease with the grocery store, walk into the bank and put 10% of the equity in, and they'd lend us the rest, to get the lease with the grocery store. If you're lucky, walk into the bank and they give you 35%. They want you to put up 65%. And I just, wait a minute, this doesn't work anymore. And so I kind of semi-retired at too young of an age. Brady and I, being good friends and watching him go through what he was going through at the time at National Business Brokers, it was tough on us when that recession hit. We had, 13 or 14 deals in escrow. The day that the banks said that we're not going to fund new car dealership acquisitions anymore. And so I went over just kind of on a part-time, honestly, part-time buddy basis to say, hey, how can we revive this business? How can we get it back on its feet again? And 15 years later, here I am. And so we just found that we loved working together. By the time we really righted the ship, the market had corrected. And Brady looked at me and he said, hey, you've been through the toughest part. Why don't you come with me? I got an appointment on a listing up in Utah and see how you like the nice part, the fun part of the business. And so I went up there and we got a listing on a Toyota store up there and sold it and thought, this business is everything that we thought it was. It can be a very, very good business going forward.
And Scott, that was one of the markers of my career. You mentioned that earlier. I'm still to this day shocked that when I pulled up to the airport in Salt Lake City to pick Gary up from his flight, that he actually showed up and he was standing on the curb and was signing up to get involved in this business. And it's been an absolute fantastic ride since. And, you're going to find that we don't do anything short term. Nothing that we do is short term. Our relationships are long term. Our business plans are long term. And sometimes, and back to business development, in this business, it's long term. We have to build relationships with clients. Sometimes it's 3, 4, 5 years before they're ready to actually sell, and we get a chance to help them improve their business before they go to the market. And so I was just shocked that day when Gary showed up and he actually was on the curb and there to be in a meeting with me to go take a listing. And we did a great job on that deal, and it was a lot of fun and got a lot of fun since.
You know what, Gary, you brought up something interesting back in the 08, 09 crash with the banks. To me, I think everybody felt it to some extent, but I felt like the number one thing that was impacting at least my stores, it had nothing to do with people not wanting to buy. I feel like I don't feel like that really dropped, but getting the loans.
That's it.
Even on the car loans
That's right.
it was the lending of money and just that stop there. I think that contributed to most of that.
No question. The banking crisis was a disaster for most businesses. Yeah.
All right, so let's dive into this about why we're here. And Brady, you've closed over 450 deals, right? And what's the biggest lesson that you've learned about creating value? And this really goes to both sides, because you've got to create value to the buyer, meaning increasing or showing the seller how to increase the value of their store or positioning it, right? And hopefully, I would assume with some of these clients that you've had around for a while, one reason you sold our store so quick is because you have long-standing relationships and you were able to call people. But at the same time, you're probably, I assume, educating them on what they need to do to position their stores or get them set up so they can maximize value. But then at the same time, how do you do that? You got to create a lot of value to the buyer too, right? So
yeah, that's good. That's such a great segue into a conversation. I'll tell you, Scott, that even the best operators, when they've been dealers for more than 5, 6, 7 years, and most of these dealers have been dealers for 20 plus 30 years, 30 plus years, oftentimes. No matter how good of an operator you are, when you've been doing something that long, there are always things that can be improved on when a new set of eyes that know what they're doing come in and take a look. And so one of the ways that we really add value to the process is being a fresh set of eyes that understand what it means to be a dealer, and we're operators ourselves. And to say that we're not involved in the dealerships at all would not be true. We are involved, weekly in our stores, and we're very intimately involved in understanding and trying to build value and create value in our own stores every day and trying to get fresh perspective. So I do think we bring a unique ability to look at a store from an operator's perspective, from a buyer's perspective. We've been buyers now of 5 stores, and we know what's important. And one of the biggest things that you just mentioned is finding the ways that the new operator can actually improve upon the existing business. And that's a process that we go through with a seller, and we did with you. You look at every aspect of the business and you try and find the areas where you can pull levers and tweak things to improve. And there's invariably, because we're human beings, there's always opportunity to find ways to improve.
The store we sold, there's a lot of meat left on that bone. There's good opportunity there.
Absolutely. And I will tell you that, car dealers, are pretty confident people, and we've never found a buyer that didn't think he could do better than the seller. That does help us a lot, and in the vast majority of cases, it actually is true, because as fresh eyes, fresh perspective, fresh energy, different way of looking at things always creates movement, and movement is good. And not every decision is the right decision, but making decisions and moving with speed and building good teams, being good people, building good teams. And one of the things that we really pride ourselves on is the buyers that we bring to deals. We want the sellers to be very proud of who they've sold their dealerships to, because these are not just markers of success in their life. It really is a legacy that dealers care about their employees, they care about their communities, they care about the people that are affected by their stores. And so that's something we take extremely seriously, and it helps a ton, because matching the right buyer with the right seller is part of the magic of what we do. And we do really pride ourselves on that.
To your point, I owned J&L Marketing since 91. And back in the 90s, our only vertical was auto. So we're selling nothing auto. And for 10 years, 13 years, all I told myself, because, you're selling two dealers, and I have no problem saying this because I can say it now because I'm on that side too, is that for 10, 13 years, all I kept saying is, if I ever owned a store, if I ever owned a store, if I ever owned a store. And so sure enough, bought the first store, Johnson City. And a lot of what I said was true. There is so much benefit from being on both sides because you go into the dealership world seeing, first off, when you're selling the dealer, you're exposed to so many good operations, good and bad. So you're able to avoid some of the things that won't work. Yep. You're able to copy or build on some of the things that you've seen really produce great results. We went from 8% in Johnson City, 8% market share to 32% inside of 3 years.
Wow.
32, not Honda, 32% total.
Wow. Jeez,
and
that's amazing.
And so crushed it. And of course it was a market everyone told us we couldn't do that there. Yeah. Which is the best market to buy in my opinion. But I will say owning the stores helped me on it helped both directions. Yeah. That wasn't a one-sided benefit. It helped on J&L. We got a better understanding because we were in better conversations and deeper on what was really needed. So Gary, let me go to you real quick on this. You bring a lot of legal and, like we said earlier, real estate expertise to the table. How important are those elements when it comes to maximizing a dealership's value during a merger and acquisition?
Yeah, there's both of them are certainly huge, and I've been really blessed by the benefit of being able to sit down with the contract because I am a lawyer still admitted in the state of California.
You're off.
Contract.
We don't have lawyers.
I just feel like I have to disclose that for somebody who's not admitted to the training. But it gives me a personal benefit to be able to sit down with the contract and review things, interact with the attorneys on both sides of the table, and help them understand a deal. But the real estate piece is really the piece where the value comes in. Because quite honestly, it's such an integral and huge part of a dealership operation. We often say, in our little conversations internally, is that the guys who have made the most money in the car dealership business have made it from their real estate. And so being able to understand that from the dealer's perspective, to be able to advise that way, selling the real estate to a buyer of a transaction isn't always the best deal for a seller. It might be, right. especially if he owns the real estate in his own family trust or whatever. It might be that selling the business but maintaining the lease is the best path to wealth building that a dealer can access. So that's our job, right? We come in and we try to sit with them and say, hey, this may be beneficial, it may not be beneficial. Let's look at the qualities of this piece versus the qualities of that piece. Maybe you should keep one, maybe you sell one. So that insight, Scott, has really helped us quite a bit and helped our clients quite a bit.
And that has to be weighed, right, Scott? Gary just made a great point, but also it may be the best thing to sell the real estate. If you have to mitigate your risk and not be in a single purpose facility, and especially if you can trade out of that real estate and on a tax-free exchange and get into something that generates a great return. So it is a complicated piece of the transaction, and helping a seller secure their legacy, not just in who the buyer is that's going to take over that business and treat everybody well, but also secure their legacy personally, financially, is a really big piece of this process. And like Gary said, every deal is unique. Every single dealer's situation is different. Every family situation is different. And it does require a lot of thought and planning to get it right.
And in Charleston, so Brady, you've already met John Garcia from Solico.
Yeah.
I don't know if you plan to attend in March or not, but I think you guys need to have a conversation that goes beyond the traditional scope with this, because you guys might be able to actually help some clients in working with them. We were able to protect they had some deals that we were able to slide
Yep.
our capital gain into that really pushed that can down the road and helped us retain quite a bit. And so that might be worth a conversation you guys have with them.
Yeah, John and Chris and I
Yeah.
have already started that conversation from the last Business Bourbon and
Good.
Cigars, and we looked at a couple of vehicles for a client, came very close to executing on, and then the factory actually stopped the deal, which is very unusual, but they had a different plan for the store. But yeah, so I'm very familiar with what you're talking about, and there are some really good tax benefits and tax havens that can really keep your net cash much higher in the transaction when you get ahead of it and plan that way.
Yeah, no, that was a huge help. I want to keep as much as I can.
Yeah. What are we doing this for?
All right. Hey, Drew. All right. So there you go. All right. Now you've worked with a lot of startups and pre-acquisition strategies. You've done a lot of in that area, correct?
Yeah.
All right. So talk to us about some of the common mistakes that you see small businesses make when they're either scaling or preparing to sell.
Well, I think it's all got to do with process, people. That's it. So I think people sometimes overestimate, which is not an unusual trait in human beings, overestimate their abilities to do things. I think especially in the startup space, when you're jumping into something, and we have personal experience with this because we jumped in, the three of us with some other partners, into another deal, auto related. And to be honest, I think a lot of guys find a new shiny object appealing, and they think that they can transfer whatever skills they've maybe built somewhere else into this new niche or space, and it doesn't always translate. I think there's something to be said for career capital and creating that over a long period of time and bringing that to bear in a new venture. So I think startups can often, at least the founders can stub their toes in thinking that they've got what it takes to do the deal, but they really don't have the career hard work expertise in that lane. So, and if you don't have that, but you've got a good idea that still is viable and sustainable, you got to figure out who to hire to fill in the gaps of your own deficiencies. And so I think in terms of scaling, that could be a big deal. Certainly, obviously, capital is a big piece. That kind of is where we ran into some headwinds on a startup that we were all involved in. And most of these things fail. Most startups fail. I don't know what the number is. It's got to be over 80% of them, don't work out in the long run. And I think a lot of that's got to do with, you burn most of your fuel getting in the sky if you're in a plane, right? And I think you're burning capital at the start of these things to get to that cruising altitude where things are more sustainable. And if you don't have the right capital structure and the right financial partners, it's going to be apparent down the road that you just actually can't make it. So,
Drew, I would add to that. I mean, I think that's such a good point. What most people don't plan for, Scott, is two things that I've seen over the 35 years I've been doing in the car space, particularly. When dealers want to go scale and grow and own more rooftops, they overestimate their team's ability and they overestimate the bench that they've developed with people, and they spread themselves too thin, and they might take a deal that's really operating well and making a great return on investment. And then they take some of those key players and they place them in other stores to go try and do the same thing, and they spread themselves thin from a people perspective. And then the other big thing that I see is that even when you have a really successful business, especially when you have a successful business and you're trying to scale, people underestimate how much additional capital it takes to grow. Everybody just thinks, oh, well, I'm going to go buy this business, I'm going to grow it, and I'm going to reinvest the profits, and that's going to sustain the growth. Not true. If you really grow, and you probably knew this when you went from 8% market share to 32% market share, it took
Growth
a lot
can
of
be
capital.
expensive.
Growth is expensive.
That's right.
So I think that those two things, the people spreading too thin and underestimating how much capital, even when you're successful, how much capital it takes to grow, are two big ones.
Well, you also got to pay attention to your cash flow. Like for instance, on the J&L marketing side, some of our better clients are OEM clients. So those are mid, upper 6, sometimes 7 figure amounts of money were floating, sometimes up to 100 days. My message when we started taking on that, because we didn't have that with direct mail, but when we switched to digital, Google direct mail, everyone was conditioned. You have to pay a high percentage up front because of the postage.
Right.
But for whatever reason, even though Google demands their check, no one does that with digital. And so,
it's net 45 or net 60, or net 100.
I would love the net 45 when it comes to those, but you can't tell, I can't tell General Motors or BMW, hey, you're going to pay me up front, and they're going to say, oh, that's fine, we'll work over here.
Right.
So but my message was, guys, this is all great and it works out on the end, but we can grow ourselves into bankruptcy. I said, if we have to have other clients in this mix and balance that type of stuff up. A lot of people don't think like that when they're scaling. So I'm glad you brought that up. Mm-hmm. Brady, you mentioned there are 3 ways to create value. You say pricing strategies, cost management, and growth. So which of these is the most or often overlooked, I should say, and how can businesses address it?
That's such a good question. An answer that's specific to the auto space, I would say, is the biggest one that is overlooked is cost takeout and expense management. Dealers when they get successful, they tend to get lazy about vendor management and cost, paying attention to expenses. And we see it all the time, when things are good. Stores grow and they start spending more money and they hire more people and they hire more vendors and they try new things. And then all of a sudden we go through a pinch and everybody's looking, to scale back their expenses very quickly. And that is one of the great things about the car business is you can actually do that because most of your expense is variable expense. Most of it is people and vendors. I would say outside of the car business that, I think pricing strategy is really interesting. I think that we tend again to pay less and less attention to being competitive, and we think that we have the best thing, and we're not necessarily paying attention to what the market is doing. We see that a lot in businesses outside the car space. In the car space, you have MSRP, you have so many different resources that dictate your pricing for new vehicles, used vehicles, parts, and labor. It's a highly competitive market, but in other spaces, it's
but on the fixed,
it's not so transparent.
On the service side, you got all these independents robbing us left and right, stealing clients away. Once people get out of warranty, I think pricing strategies matter a lot there.
No question, and it represents the biggest, the biggest retainable gross and the biggest retainable net of a dealership is the fixed side of the business. And it's interesting because most dealers come up through the variable side of the business. It's pretty rare to have a dealer that was a fixed, started as a mechanic and became a dealer. It's not uncommon for a dealer to have started as a salesperson and become a dealer. And so I would say in the auto space, you're right, Scott, that the fixed side pricing strategy is a big one. We lose 80% of our business after customers are out of warranty and they're going to independence, and that's a huge loss.
I've never understood, and I say this because I could do the same thing and haven't. So maybe it's just a time and capacity issue. To your point, we got to have the right team. I don't understand, and I'm going to actually bring this up at one of my locations, is I don't understand why I wouldn't buy an independent shop. Good brand, good reputation. And then that 80% that you're getting it from every dealer. And then, of course, I'd have a strategic alliance with my own store. So when it's time for them to buy a new or used car, I'm going to be promoting it.
Right. So one of the things that we do is a value creation plan for our clients. We try and help them come up with a really good value creation plan. And oftentimes our advice is to look at the local independent shops around the dealership or a body shop around the dealership and actually go, rather than going and buying another dealership, acquire 2 or 3 of the independent service repair facilities around the dealership. Acquire the wheel and tire shop down the street. acquire a body shop that, you're already feeding a ton of business to, and pay attention to vertically integrating. Now, again, this requires the right team. It requires the right people. You don't want to just jump into these, because back to Drew's point, you don't want to just go after the next shiny object in what you think is a related business, but is actually very different than what you've been operating. So this is not something to just go jump into, but it's really worth a hard look. And we've seen, in fact, in some of our stores, we're implementing that strategy right now. We're actually under contract to buy a few body shops.
Good.
We're looking at some independent repair shops right around some of our stores. So, and it will really boost fixed gross. I mean, it will radically boost fixed gross. So
that's awesome. Yeah,
wholesale parts is a huge part of our business, right? In any dealer's business, wholesale parts should be a huge part of the business. And how better to lock in, that spread than to sell them to yourself.
That's right.
All right, so Drew, let's switch directions a little bit back to the business development side of it. Talk to us about the importance of strong relationships. You guys have already kind of touched on this. I saw the result of it. There's no way you would have sold that store that fast. Mm-hmm. Either I drastically underpriced it.
No, you didn't. You got a healthy price. You made all the money, Scott.
Or you guys had very strong relationships where you could go to people that you knew were the right fit, which is, I know what happened there. And so talk to us, Drew, about the importance of what that role is in building those strong relationships. And then more importantly, what tips can you share with the audience to help them build those type of relationships?
I mean, it's there's nothing new under the sun. Scott, you've done these so many times. You probably heard from smart people that you're going to hear the same thing over and over again if it's going to actually be a durable truth. But
success leaves clues.
Yeah, I mean, just do what you say you're going to do. Like this integrity is like everything. Like what's that quote? The many a man's character wouldn't recognize his reputation if they met on the street, right? I mean. Yeah. To the degree to which you can get those two to be pretty close together, if not the same person, is I think the goal in building relationships and building trust ultimately. So I think a unique aspect of how we approach the business at National Business Brokers is we do have such a strong emphasis on the buying side of the pool. So, obviously listings is everything in our world, and you have to have the listing, and we definitely always look for that. But to be able to go to our strong, deep, and wide pool of buyers who we've spent that time building that trust and develop those relationships with. We know who we're bringing to a deal, and we can confidently represent them to our sellers to say, no, here's why you should take these people seriously because of X, Y, and Z. And we've already helped them do this, or we help them buy that store, or we help them sell their stores as well, whatever the case may be. And I just think that comes from a proven track record of doing it time and time and time again, because it's a small world, and unfortunately secrets won't stay secret very long in our space. And if you're the kind of person that doesn't deal well with integrity with people, at some point those stories will find their way to the surface. And we live and die by our reputation. And so I think because we've represented our buyers well in previous ventures, they trust us, and when we tell them what the deal is on the selling side, they believe the story we're telling. So again, we often act as dual agents where we represent the buyers and the sellers, and we defend that by saying it allows us to be able to tell the story with integrity to both sides all the time, because when you get into a different scenario, it becomes very adversarial very quickly, and you always got to play the second guessing game. Going, is this person really telling me the truth, or do I have to find out the hard way eventually? So I think we can just eliminate a lot of that work and gymnastics by just, again, bringing the people that we've already done this work with to the table. They trust us. Our sellers can trust that we've done that work. And ultimately, it'll show in not just the amount of transactions that we've done, but the types of transactions we've done for people.
And Scott, I'm going to add to that. I'm going to compliment both Gary and Drew in this because they have it in spades, and that is authenticity is really important. There is a salesmanship sometimes that comes with people in our space that can be akin to what the reputation of car dealers sometimes has been. Which I say that reluctantly, because we know dealers, and it's the very, very small few that have earned that reputation for the larger group, unfortunately. But in our space, authenticity and not cutting any corners, doing the work, actually being an expert at what you do, and learning this business from the inside out, and not cutting any corners. And that's something that I've had the privilege of working with Drew and Gary both for many years, and they're guys that don't cut corners. They're experts at what they do. They're authentic, and integrity is the bedrock of their relationships. And that's why we have so many. We have hundreds and hundreds of, if not thousands, of relationships with dealers across the country.
You know what I think is probably one of the strongest benefits you guys have by being on both sides of this. And you kind of alluded to it earlier, like the hardest part to scale and grow as you're adding more stores, right? Is a lot of maybe groups overestimate the impact their team might have, or overestimate their ability to handle that growth.
Yeah.
When I was talking to a good friend, went from 0 stores to 19 inside of 10 years. Todd Blue.
Yeah, very well.
Yeah. So I actually sat down with him before he bought that first Porsche store in Houston, and we were at Starbucks, and he was asking me, all right, what do I need to know about the auto industry? He knew nothing other than the collecting. And I said, the number one thing, and if you handle this, the rest will take care of itself, assuming he's going to be, we all know how he is. He's very detailed. I said, find yourself the right GM. You find the right GM, they always attract the right people. They always move the needle. And I think the challenge with that is that's easier said than done, because there's only so many really good ones. I think
Sure.
There's a lot of people that think they're good. There's only so many really good ones who actually are responsible for the impact, which got me thinking a little bit. And this is where I think one of the biggest advantages you guys have is, let's say you're selling a store and the buyer has a good team of people and someone qualified. If you have those relationships, Drew, and you've cultivated those, where they can walk into a store and improve the situation.
Yeah.
At the same time, when you're buying a store, you also know what it takes to improve a situation and what type of person you need to make that happen. So I think that's a huge advantage when you play on that side. Not to mention the connections when you're on the vendor side, you have connections with other vendors that are relationships that are built very easily. And you almost have this inside knowledge of certain things that I think not on both sides you don't have.
Not almost, Scott. We really do. I mean, that really truly is a huge advantage that we have over any of our competitors is that we are doing what dealers are doing every day. We're meeting the right vendors, we're hiring the right people, or we're hiring the wrong people and we're paying the price for it. And
that's right.
We've been through those ups and downs. We can totally relate when a dealer calls us and says, my general manager just quit on me over the weekend. He's been with me for 15 years. I don't know what I'm going to do. I need to sell the store. Well, maybe not. Maybe we can help you find the right GM. So there is a huge advantage to being in the business.
This is a question for all of you, and that's where I wanted to go with. So I feel like you're just teeing these up for me. You're following our script to perfection, Brady.
Oh, if people only knew how little of a script there is.
So I would assume, is there a market or is there some play there where you have these relationships with, you got to walk a fine line with that one, but is there a way for you guys to help place talent? Or let's say, I'll give you a perfect example. Drew, in our last event in September at Business Bourbon Cigars, we had a dealer there who is getting up there in age, is starting to travel more and more. I don't know. I'm not going to mention his name, but I don't know if you had a chance to meet him or happened to be in that mastermind. And his situation was he was looking to find a managing partner to come on where he would give a percentage of the store, let that guy take over the operation so he could enjoy his time without giving up everything, right? You guys ever help coordinate that?
Yeah.
Is there a market for that?
Yeah.
Or, I mean,
we do. And it's something that is very sensitive. We're very careful about it. We would never go recruit somebody away from a dealer. We wouldn't want somebody coming recruiting people away from us. But here's what's funny is they call us. They're unhappy or they want to make a change or they've already made a decision to go. It's not uncommon for us to have a listing on a dealership. The general manager of that store call us totally independently, having no idea that the dealership is for sale because they've decided they want to go buy a store. And they're running a store that is for sale and they don't know it and we can't tell them.
Yeah.
And we don't. So there are.
And then you can't. It's not like you can go back to the seller because now he's going to know his.
No, that's right. We can't tell either of them anything. And so,
exactly. So that whole thing about authenticity we were talking about earlier, there are some exceptions.
Well, we sometimes have to be authentically vague, right, Gary? But that does happen all the time, and we do have. Listen, everybody is the master of their own destiny, and we respect that. And a GM that's put in 25 years and is never going to have the opportunity to have an ownership stake in the store he's in, and he's got put his capital away, and he wants to go find a store. We're going to help him do that. We're not going to go recruit him. We're not going to go seek him out from a dealer, but we're going to honor it when they call us. And same with the dealer. We respect their employees and the fact that they've built these teams, and we don't want to disrupt that. So we're very careful, but we do let people. We want to help. We want to help people succeed in this business.
Yeah, I would say we just to add to that, we sometimes live on the buying side in this strange Venn diagram of there's GMs that we have that contact us all the time that obviously they don't want their owner to know that they're even looking to do their own thing, but we are trying to look for the right deal if it's the right fit at the right time. And they may not have all the capital to pull the deal down themselves, but they want to jump in and be a partner, maybe kind of like, over time. So for the guy that you mentioned, or similar stories like that, once in a while, and it's a very nuanced deal because, to say to yourself, I might want to take some chips off the table and slow down and bring in another partner, but to actually pull the trigger and do that are two vastly different things sometimes because I think they underestimate their ability to kind of release some of the reins, especially if it's a store that they've known and have operated for a long period of time. That's a big deal for anybody. This is all they've done. So, but once in a while, we'll find the right pairing of those managers who are looking to get out and they're the right fit for that brand and that kind of market, and also for that kind of personality of an owner to do a kind of a buy-in, buyout situation over time. So it does happen.
Yeah. And by and large, good dealers want their people to go take advantage of opportunities. I mean, I can't tell you how many times we've been in this exact situation, and the dealer finds out after the GM has actually made an offer or bought a store, and how many times that dealer actually ends up cheering them on, even though they're really sorry to lose them. They end up cheering them on, sometimes even invest in them, to help them close the deal. So it really is. Entrepreneurs respect other entrepreneurs, and I don't know any more entrepreneurial business than the car business.
Have you ever thought about, let's say let's back up and you're taking us on, all right, as a client to sell. In your initial conversations, have you ever thought just to say, hey, let me ask you this hypothetically. What if your buyer's in your store? In other words, we won't go to him because I understand the sensitivity of alerting him, that you might be selling or something like that. But what if he's the guy, whether it's buying in partially and then allowing you to step away and letting that person do their thing, and or buying it outright? Would you be open to that? And there has to be a way to pre-frame that to where the dealer feels somewhat comfortable, right? And maybe you're approaching that GM as more of any store situation And if
there's an important sequence of events here, because this happens all the time in our business, but it's very important the sequence with which it happens. Framing that conversation with the owner and seller in the beginning is important to see if they're even open to it.
Yeah.
In most cases, they are open to it, but they also know that their GM doesn't have the capital to buy the store. So then what happens is we go to the market, we bring different types of buyers to deals. We bring operating buyers, we bring investors, we bring, sometimes private equity is now, coming into the space pretty strongly with operators. And that is the moment when we know we have a deal structured where it might be a financial buyer coming into the store and they're looking for a good operator and they actually really want to make that GM their partner. After the seller is comfortable and the buyer and the seller, we've structured the primary aspects of the deal and the seller is very comfortable that that deal is going to happen, because remember, a seller really cares about only a handful of things. They care about who the buyer is, that they're going to protect their legacy and take care of their people. They care that they have the capital to close and that they can get approval from the factory. Well, this is a unique piece of that. The GM that's been running that store is more qualified than anyone to get approval as the dealer for that store. And so there's a moment in time where that conversation becomes, in most cases, we end up having that conversation. Most transactions, it doesn't happen very often where the GM ends up staying a part of the organization and becomes a partner, but it does happen. In most cases, it's dealers that are experienced dealers that have operators themselves that want to come in and buy stores. But you bring up a good point. It's a conversation we always have with a client.
Okay, good.
But we respect their decision, because many times they say, I don't want my GM to have any idea that I'm considering selling. That would be devastating to the business, and or potentially devastating. So we're very, very sensitive to, and like I said, every situation is unique, and we have an obligation to follow our clients' instructions as long as it's legal.
So, that's right. So Gary, we've talked a little bit about, how do we develop more value to the buyer and seller in terms of growth, increasing the value of the store, things like that. What does a store have to do to increase the value of the real estate?
That's really good question. Really insightful. There's so many times that we find we'll look at a statement, right, and we'll find that they're underpaying themselves rent. For example, they may show on the statement that they're only servicing their mortgage when the market rent may be 120%. So that's a way that they can certainly increase the value of the real estate. As much as I hate to say it, one of the things that increases the value of the real estate is imaging your store. And I hate to say it because it's certainly the bane of all of our existence as operators, right? Is that requirement and that gauntlet coming down and having to do it in a particular time. And yet when it's done, it's so much easier for us to find a buyer for an image.
Well, yeah, we don't have to spend more money over and above.
Exactly. Wrap it into their financing and, they can do all those things that make it easier for them. So it raises the value of actually both the business and the real estate often. So that's just a couple little pieces.
And Gary, talk to him about REITs, because that's another way that we've seen, higher values for real estate.
Yeah, it's there are, for a long time there was pretty much one player in that market, and they were more or less making the market. Since I'd say in the last 7 or 8 years, there's 2 or 3 others that have joined the market that have made it a little bit more of a competitive marketplace. So if you're looking to allocate your capital to the business side of the investment and to allow somebody else to own the real estate, if that's part of your business plan, and it is for many, many, many people, now you've got a choice of 3 or 4 really good REIT players in the space that'll come in, that'll value that real estate for you, do more or less a sale leaseback, right? Well, they'll buy the real estate when you close on the transaction and then lease it to you over a period of time. And that can be a really, really healthy way to maintain your balance sheet as an investor, and to allocate the capital to the business side, where honestly, one of the beautiful things about operating a business versus owning real estate is that in real estate, you're generally happy with, I don't know, 6, 7, 8% on an operating business, a rate of return on an operating business, return on capital. And on the operations side, we're looking north of 20, right? So when you look at that, it's not hard to make the decision to say, I've got X amount of cash in this stack. I'm going to allocate it to the businesses where I'm going to get a 20+% rate of return versus the real estate where I'm going to get a single-digit rate of return.
Mm-hmm. And this can be for anybody, but like, do you think there's a mindset out there? I wouldn't think there would be too much of this, but it could be. Is there a perception out there? Because not everybody's. This was the first business I've sold. Mm-hmm. Out of all of them, I've never sold one until now.
Yeah.
And I don't want to say it was because I was afraid of it or anything like that. The opportunity finally. But is there a perception of like, I don't know everything that's involved in selling it, I'm not going to mess with it. I'm just going to keep running it.
Well,
is there any of that?
I would say that most of the sellers that we deal with have never sold a business before. They've owned it, operated, built it. It's oftentimes what people really underestimate in our line of work is how emotional this process is.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. How difficult it actually is emotionally to go through it. It's like a death or a divorce or and so being a part of that process, shoulder to shoulder with these owners, going through that process and doing it really well and helping.
It depends on your divorce.
Well, that's right. That's true. That is true. That's funny.
Could be a celebration. Yeah.
Boy, there's so many things that just came to mind that I'm not going to say right now. But in the context of which we're talking about, sometimes partnerships do go bad, and it's a relief, and it's a relief to get out of that partnership. But in general, it's a very difficult emotional process to sell a dealership, and walking alongside dealers to help them truly secure their legacy. And it's not just financial. It really is a legacy of relationships and the impact that we've had on people and the impact that we've had on communities. That's really important to dealers. Like for us, for example, in our Hawaii stores, we opened a food pantry. It's a little Giving Hope Hawaii food pantry. We called Troy Duhan. We said, Troy, how do you do this? He said, why don't you guys just do Giving Hope and let's just open a franchise? And we said, great. We're feeding 5,600 families a month out of that store. 2 weeks worth of groceries, and it's everything from produce to meat to refrigerated items to hot meals. I can't believe it. Out of a 3,500 square foot little food pantry, we are literally serving 5,600 people 2 weeks worth of groceries a month. Over 30% of the people in our immediate area around our stores experience food insecurity, which means that their children are missing 3 to 4 meals a week because they don't have enough money for groceries. So, that's going to be a bigger part of our legacy in Kaneohe, Hawaii, than how many Dodges we sold or how many Hyundais we sold.
That's right.
Now, we care about selling Dodges and Hyundais, and we want to do a good job and give people transportation and do it at a great price and treat people really well. That's important to us. But the biggest legacy is going to be the people that we fed that no one even knows. We don't advertise it. It's not, no one even knows we're doing it. And so those are the things that dealers, when they get invested in their communities and their people, and they know the names of their employees' wives and children, and those are the things that people don't think about. That is really a privilege, and it's a lot of fun, but it's probably the most difficult part of the process.
I feel like the auto industry, if you could say that, what's the best thing it does? I would say they are very giving people in their local communities, and almost more than any other industry.
No question. I mean, people don't know, Scott, how generous car dealers are. I mean, look at what Arnold Casita is doing with Petra Cares. Yeah. And now dealers are starting to take on the Petra Cares mantle and intervening in kids' lives, vulnerable young people that have been in the foster care system that are aging out and have nowhere to go. They're homeless on their 18th birthday, literally.
Yeah.
The statistics of these kids are awful. Within 3 years, 85% of them are either in prison, homeless, or dead. And Arnold started a program where he's taking these kids and offering a 7-week training course to become a level 1 technician, and then getting them jobs in dealerships for $60,000, $70,000 a year. It's changing their lives. So I agree with you, Scott. There's no category of people that I know that are more generous than new car dealers.
Yeah, I agree. All right, so Brett, let me ask you this, and you guys, anybody can jump in on this one. You guys have handled, as national business brokers, you've handled over 15 billion in transactions. That's a lot over a period of time. What do you see as the biggest change that you've seen in automotive, specifically when it comes to mergers and acquisitions over the years? Any one of you?
Go ahead, Gary.
I was just going to say a relatively, Brady referenced earlier to a factory stopping a deal that we had going. I think one of the changes that we're seeing, and this is like real time stuff, we're seeing a rise in the use of the ROFR to levels that we've never seen before. So factories exercising rights of first refusal, threatening to exercise rights of first refusal to extract what they want to extract from a deal. I think that's it's still a bit of the Wild West. There's some settled case law in certain areas, but there's still some Wild West aspects to it that make it a real challenge for everybody.
That's how we got our second store. That's how we got Cape.
That's right.
We got Cape from that. We were the first one that Honda exercised that right to. We were the very first group to get that.
Yeah, that's cool. Well, and I would say, just to tack on that, we're a little unique at National Business Brokers because we love to handle deals that are small individual rooftops, and we do deals that are in the hundreds of millions of dollars. We really do, from a $5 million deal to a $450 million deal or more. We have a deal right now. We have it's almost a $200 million transaction, or a little north of a $200 million transaction. The factories are considering, we can tell by the way they're engaging, that they're considering exercising right of first refusal. So I would say that's one of the other ways that the market has really changed, is the high dollar amount of a lot of these transactions, where buyers have done a good job of buying 4, 5, 6, 7 stores. And now all of a sudden, as a group, they become worth a lot more than they were as even trading at a multiple of an individual store. And so the amount of capital that it takes to buy these stores today is, and this is really accelerated in the last 7, 8 years. Just the amount of capital it takes to buy these stores. Even if it's a single rooftop, many times it can be in the $25, $30 million range, for a single rooftop.
I'm not going to. You guys would die if I told you how much cash we had to come up with for our first store. It would make you sick to your stomach. But you've dealt with Raquel, so you understand that dynamic and what she was able to negotiate with the bank at the time.
Yeah,
I'm going to tell you, we had to come up with $150,000 in cash.
Oh my goodness! Wow.
And the value of that store, Johnson City. So that's what we had to come up with in cash.
That's a pretty good return on equity.
Yeah, I think that's an operating partner you want to keep, because it sounds like she negotiated a hell of a deal for you, Scott.
I'll say I'll throw in one more item that I'm finding more and more of a prevalent issue. We go to a lot of these state association meetings where they get all the car dealers together, and they got best practices, and they've got third party folks, and oftentimes they've got some legal guys jumping in there talking about what to look out for as a dealer. What are some of the regulations that are coming, and those are all different in state specific. Yeah. I can tell you, and these guys would know better than I would because they've been at it longer. It seems to me these days, if you're a dealer, if you're an aging dealer and you've been putting up with all the regulatory issues that you have to deal with, that environment must look completely different today than it did 10, 15, 20 years ago. And I think if you're already a little tired and looking for some excuses to get out, you go to one of these state association meetings and you listen to these guys talk about what you got to look out for and how you might get sued over here and there. Some of these guys, I was just like, I'm done. I can't do this anymore. Because it's treacherous just figuring out how to navigate some of that regulatory water. And I'm just seeing it more and more. I'm not sure if I'm seeing that slowing down anytime soon, but it's an issue.
Yeah, big time.
Speaking
Yeah,
of speaking of state associations, you guys know Don Hall from the Virginia
Oh yeah,
auto dealer.
yeah,
All right.
yeah.
So he just registered. He'll be there in March.
Fantastic.
Great.
So it'd be a good person for you guys to connect with. I want to get. I got a couple more questions here, but before we jump to that, I would imagine from a legal standpoint with the first right of refusal stuff. I'm gonna give you a real world scenario, and I'm gonna tell you why this is a bigger impact than just the one store that might be involved. Right? Huge dealer group in town. This is anywhere from, I don't know the total. I want to say probably 75 to 120 million dollar total package deal, excluding real estate. One of the stores was worth 30. All right. We had an OEM come to us and say, we want you to be the dealer. Now, of course, it was only that one store, and it happened to be the expensive, the good one. But that was the one reason this group, which he's probably he is the number one independent dealer. He was the one buying it. So you guys know who that is. I tried to tell this. I tried to tell my partner, I said, we are going to jump through all these hoops. And let me tell you what's going to end up happening. I said, because this is the one store they're pulling, I said, this guy is going to say, oh, no. And never allow that to happen. And sure enough, we went through all the way to the end, and that's exactly what happened. The seller, and if I was a seller, I'd say the same thing. My guy's going to back out of this. This is the only reason he's buying the deal. And now you're impacting not just this store, but all of them, and vice versa. He's going to say the same thing, and I don't blame him. I would have done the same thing. How do you guys see that playing out? But it still kind of happens.
Yeah, it's complicated. I mean, that is this happens more time than you realize. In fact, it's like Gary said, it's happening more and more. And, the factories that have the really good stores want to cherry pick them out and give them to the dealers that they think are going to be more successful or that they know, or, for whatever reason. And it really does screw up a seller's plan and strategy. And it certainly is bad for the buyer, right? And the challenge is that there are franchise agreements and state laws that are all different by state. And factories have more influence and power in some states more than others. In general, franchise laws gives dealers some standing to push back on this process, but not always, and certainly not definitively. And I happen to be on the one of the appointed members of the California New Motor Vehicle Board, one of 3 dealer members in California, and so I hear these cases all the time. And the factories come and bring their case, and the dealers come and bring their case, and the New Motor Vehicle Board has to make decisions. The public members that vote make decisions based on how they read the law and the franchise law and the buy-sell. And more times than not, unfortunately, the factories win these fights. They're better capitalized. They're willing to go to the mat if it's something they really want to see happen. And so the only thing you can do is try and architect the deal on the front end with really good attorneys to try and make cross contingencies that are real, that are difficult to break for any of the manufacturers. And, oftentimes when the factory really gets stuck in and a buyer and a seller are adamant to not let the factory do it, the deal just dies and the seller doesn't end up selling. And that's a tragedy for everybody, And so, again, this is one of those things, Scott, that requires a lot of forethought and planning. It's a part of our process when we talk to someone that's considering selling their dealership. This is always a part of that conversation. And
I was going to say that's one of the biggest benefits of working with you guys. For one, knowing how to plan, but also bringing the right people to the deal.
Yeah, that's right. And that really is the ultimate solution, is bringing a buyer that the manufacturer is really going to want and they're going to accept, and that they're going to have a really hard time making a decision to rofer it to somebody else. Now, there's nothing you can do if a factory wants to do a favor to a dealer who did something for them and they take it because they want to do that. There's nothing you can do about that. But you can bring a really compelling buyer to the deal that the factory, when they get to know him, says, you know what, I want this person to be our dealer.
Yeah. All right.
I was referring to the Wild West earlier, that this is the exact scenario I was referring to, because the case law is not settled. The statutory law varies from state to state. And we happen to be on a listing right now with that has a platform with one set of stores in one state and one set of stores in another state. Same factories are involved. And we are having to do in-depth research right now in real time. I spent an hour and a half yesterday, reviewing the statutory and state laws and case laws in both those states. And it is so unsettled still that it's unsettling for everybody involved. And you nailed it. That is the issue, because now we've got a seller who could get stuck with the lesser of the franchises. And, in all honesty, the value that he's getting for the stores, the lesser franchises are probably buoyed a little bit higher because of the greater franchise that's involved.
Yeah.
And when that greater franchise is gone, those lesser franchises will sink to the levels that, that they would on their own. And that's a difficult situation for a seller to be in. So hence the conclusion we end up with that Brady alluded to is oftentimes they just don't sell in that particular case. And then we have to start on a much longer path of how we pave the way for the seller and the factories.
All right. So final question for all three of you. You can't repeat the answer to any of the other ones. So whoever goes last, I'll let you guys determine the order. Whoever goes last obviously has the hardest job. So if you could leave business owners with one key insight about creating value or preparing for an exit, what would it be? One key. You cannot repeat each other.
I'll go last.
I'll go first. I'll take the low-hanging fruit in my mind. If we could encourage a seller, business owner, to be very honest with himself, brutally honest with himself as to where he's missing the mark, and then allow us to advertise that, to find the people that are really good at what they're not good at, then we can get value for that.
Yeah.
That's a great answer.
That's what I was going to say, but I'll say something different.
You got to come up with something else.
Far less eloquently than that, obviously. No, I was along the same lines around honesty. I would say one of the worst dynamics in our business is being surprised by things we weren't told about when we're trying to represent a seller to a buyer, or even vice versa, to be honest. So on the seller side, as far as creating value, I would say get your house in order, have really clean books. You have no idea how much that will impact the integrity of a deal and the lubricant of a deal. It's just the opposite has been too many times. We've seen it. And skeletons in the closets, when they come out and dance, it's the worst thing in the world. So clean up your books, get your house in order.
Yeah, that's good. I'm going to build off of both of those answers because they're great answers. The biggest challenges or problems with a store are the biggest opportunities for the buyer. And like Gary said, being humble enough and vulnerable enough to let those be exposed is actually good for the deal, because it exposes opportunity. What buyers are looking for is a dream. They're looking for their, fulfilling their goals, their dreams, and it has to do with building and growing and making something better than you found it. And so for sellers to be willing to be vulnerable, I think is key. So Gary covered that one. Drew, you're right on the money with what you said too, is building on that. I'll be a little more technical in response in terms of building value. It's really helpful to go through the value creation process prior to selling. Let us come in and do an analysis of your dealership and show you where the improvement opportunities are, and let you start working on those before we take you to market, so your bottom line improves. One of the biggest challenges that we have in deals is when a seller signs a listing and thinks he sold his dealership or her dealership. And now all of a sudden the performance starts to fall off right as we're going through the process of showing the business to buyers. And it's terrible. It's the wrong time to take your foot off the gas. In fact, you need to double down and improve your operation while we're going through this process, because there's nothing better than a buyer seeing profits increasing
Right.
as we're getting closer to a closing. And human nature is the opposite. We tend to think, oh, now I've made the decision. Emotionally, I'm checking out. I see myself retired. I'm not paying as close attention. And now all of a sudden the performance begins to trail off in the store, and that hurts the deal. So, and sometimes causes the deal not to close because a buyer gets concerned that something's wrong.
Yeah.
So I would say, it's the moment to double down on performance and let us come in and help you build that value and do the analysis to make the store increase while we're going through the process rather than the other way around.
Yeah, incredible conversation today. I sit here and everything you're saying, I'm sitting there thinking, well, gosh, all right, you're telling me, this angle from national business brokers, but at the same time, you're following this advice as dealers, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're more organized. Your books are in order. Let's say you're selling, you're putting the pedal to it. Why wouldn't you want to make more at the end anyways and get everything you could? But all this advice, you can see, you sit there and you're seeing 15 billion in transactions. What drove prices down and what drove them up. And so you're sitting there running your store saying, we have to do this because if we don't, the value of our businesses go down. It's not just about selling cars and there's other things involved, right? And then all the things vice versa that help you as well. Absolutely love it. Let me ask you, if guys want to reach out to you all, what's the easiest way to do it?
Well, nationalbusinessbrokers.com is our website. That's the easiest way to reach us. We each have our, we're on that page along with all of our vice presidents that run all of our regions. My cell phone is 949-910-2060. Gary and Drew, you guys give your cell phone?
Yeah.
My cell phone is 949-910-2060.
Hey, that's great. I'm going to get all your listings.
949-302-0728. You can get me on LinkedIn anywhere.
Yeah. And mine's 949-433-1272. You can get us directly on the website, LinkedIn. Those are all great places.
Guys, awesome conversation today. If you guys haven't done, everybody, and I want to thank the audience for tuning in. We got some comments. So I encourage you guys to go to Facebook, X, YouTube, and LinkedIn. I already see Facebook comments. By the way, we don't get all the different social channels don't all allow the comments to come in. So, we only see a certain channel here. So go in there and answer those questions because there might be some questions you guys can help with on there. The incredible show. Thanks again to the audience. And if you haven't done so already, make sure you go to meplusultra.com so you can subscribe to Me Plus Ultra. Also go to YouTube and subscribe to Me Plus Ultra Network. That way you get notified on all our future episodes, just like this one here. Great topic. I love when we talk mergers, acquisitions, but what a great twist today, being on both sides of that aisle and just the benefits and advantages that come from that. So awesome job today, guys. Thank you.
Thanks, Scott. Thanks
Thanks,
a lot. A lot of
Scott.
fun.
Be with
A lot
you.
of fun.
Yeah.
See you in March.